Hi there, welcome to Squid Studios, where it all comes together. I am Kelly, and I love playing in alternative tunings. I play in alternative tunings so much that I accumulated pretty much the same guitar, just tons of the same guitar that are tuned to the different tunings. And you might ask yourself, why not just take the one guitar and tune the guitar string down to the alternative tunings? And that's a really great question. So, as you can see, when you tune the string down instead of putting a thicker string in its place to tune down, the warble on one side is really big and the warble on the other side is really small. The one on the really small warble, that is a normal tuning. The one with the large is when you tune it down without making a larger string take its place. To easily understand this, if you were going to go after these lower notes on an instrument with more strings like a harp or the piano harp, that's the reason that the strings get really big in order to get those lower tones, because you don't want to have this warble which makes the sound warble. You want to have a nice clean tone with a taut enough, large enough string to make a low, steady tone without warbling off and losing control, which you can hear when you're playing, and much less when you're listening. You can hear that looseness in the string. And the biggest reason you want to pay attention to these gauges and when you're detuning or uptuning your strings is because you might damage your guitar. Obviously, if you put light strings on and you try to detune, it's going to be all floppy. But if you put heavier strings on and you try to tune to a normal tuning, E, A, D, G, B, E, then you are going to have a problem with the guitar snapping in half because you've put, big corded strings on there. And the guitar was not designed for that tension level. So, please be careful when experimenting. You don't want to damage your guitar, and you also don't want floppy strings, which is the whole point of this. How do I detune properly or sensically? And I hope this helps. Okay, not to make matters more complicated, but if you go to the guitar store, which I definitely recommend for most cases, but when it comes to strings, unless you're just learning how to play in standard tunings, which your guitar store will have plenty of string gauge availabilities for you to start feeling out light, medium, and heavy. Sometimes they'll have alternative tuning types, and you look at this big wall at the guitar store, right? And it's got all these strings, and you're thinking, there's every single availability here, right? But there isn't. Really, there isn't. If you go and you actually list out all of the gauges that are available from like Dario or Martin or something like that, you see that there's a huge range of string gauges that aren't available at the stores. And this is how you hone up specifically what tension level you prefer for playing different types of tunings. And definitely experimenting in this is one of the cheaper things to do, really, because they're $3 to $5 a pack. I mean, even for the NYXLs are a little bit more expensive, but most of the Dario line and just the regular XLs, they are regular price. They're $3 to $5 a pack, which is affordable for experimentation. Okay, so then the question then becomes, is there a company out there that was meticulous in making the strings available for all these different types of tunings, from open chorded tunings to detuning? And the answer is yes. Dario XLs do spread across the entire gambit, and they have alternative combinations from the lightest strings to the heaviest strings, lightest strings being for tuning up. It goes all the way over to the other end of the spectrum, where you have a really thick top string, and the rest of the strings are all normal gauged, whatever your level of normal is. Whatever feels good to you, whether it's medium, so you'd have medium strings going down and one really thick string at the top so that you can tune it down to a drop tuning over a detune. To achieve this on your guitar, you would just have to put a thicker string on the guitar. But you're asking yourself, well, really, what gauge do I play at comfortably? And how thick should the string get to different tunings? I asked the same question. When I asked that question, I said, okay, you're gonna have to make this chart and you're gonna have to explain to yourself what gauges make sense for what tunings. Then feel them all out and keep moving gauge to gauge in the different tunings and keep track of it, which I did. I made extensive charts keeping track of all of the different strings, their tunings, which guitars they were on. This allowed me to hone in on my favorite gauges for each tuning. And I've worked that chart out. It's over at kidsquidstudios.com. It's on the articles page under string gauges. So that way you can click on the gauges that you want and it'll direct you right to Amazon and you can purchase those strings. Okay, so like I had said before, I had spent a really long time figuring out which exact gauges I liked for each tuning. I recommend starting somewhere and making logical choices to the other alternative tunings. And this goes back to the movie I made about buying your first guitar, where I said a lot of people spend way too much money on their first guitar, and instead of spending a couple $100s, so that way you can get more guitars, and always kind of only spend a couple $100s as opposed to, you know, 5 to 8 to 1,000 when it's really not necessary, when you don't know exactly what you want to do in the end. Even if you're saying, I want to play lead guitar, I want to play electric lead guitar, and that's fine. But the question is, what tuning do you want to play in? And do you only want to play in one tuning for the rest of your life? Or do you want the ability to be able to play in multiple tunings, to be able to explore different artists that you typically never get to because it doesn't sound the same playing the right chord formations or the right rhythm structures in a different tuning? Because it's not the sounds that they're making on the album, and you're going, how are they getting these sounds? Why don't I sound good when I'm playing with the album? And most of the time it's because you're not in the same tuning that they are playing in. I hope you guys are trying to enjoy yourselves as much as you can during your self-quarantine by learning and doing more things that you weren't able to do before because you didn't have the time. But now that you're stuck at home and you do have the time, I hope you are learning. I hope you are growing. So thanks for joining us at Kid Squid Studios, where it all comes together. And I hope you guys learned something about gauges and the fact that there are way more availabilities out there than what you see at the store. And experimenting in these different gauges is how you're going to find out the breadth of music that you will want to play, as opposed to limiting yourself right off the bat. You can shop for these strings in the links below, which always helps us when you guys use those links to do shopping at Amazon. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but we do earn commission on those purchases. So use those links to your heart's content. And we will see you next time, so stay safe, keep creative, and check out our other channels.